original narrative, especially created for Love Behind Gold. Alexandra's trembling fingers clutched the fountain pen, hovering above the marriage contract that would save her family, but cost her freedom. Across the polished mahogany table, Damien Blake watched her with those piercing blue eyes that had earned him the nickname, the Glacier, in business circles. His jaw tightened as she hesitated, the Manhattan skyline framing his powerful silhouette like a kingdom. He commanded, "Second thoughts, Miss Winters." His voice smooth as steel. Alexandra raised her chin, meeting his cold stare with defiance that surprised even herself. "Just wondering what kind of man buys a wife, Mr. Blake," she whispered, signing her name with a decisive stroke that echoed through the silent room. The Winters Foundation annual charity gala was Alexandra's last hope. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel sparkled with wealth and influence, the exact resources her family's struggling foundation desperately needed. Every chandelier crystal seemed to mock their impending financial collapse. Alexandra smoothed her borrowed gown, a midnight blue vintage piece that had belonged to her mother. It was elegant, but noticeably not this season's couture. Unlike the designer ensembles adorning New York's elite around her, she didn't care. Tonight wasn't about fashion, it was about survival. "Target at your 2 o'clock, her brother Michael whispered, discreetly nodding toward the entrance. Damien Blake just arrived. Alexandra's breath caught. Even those who avoided business news recognized Blake Enterprises' notorious CEO. At 38, Damien Blake had built an empire through ruthless acquisitions and strategic brilliance. His reputation was legendary, brilliant, merciless, and emotionally unreachable. "Remember, we need at least $2 million to keep the foundation afloat," Michael murmured. "He's our best shot." "I know what's at stake," Alexandra replied, watching Blake move through the crowd. Unlike the other power players who worked the room with practiced smiles, Blake maintained a deliberate distance, his expression revealing nothing. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a custom tuxedo that emphasized his athletic build. His dark hair was precisely cut, and his features might have been carved from marble, handsome but cold. Alexandra squared her shoulders and advanced. 28 years of being a Winters had taught her that privilege came with responsibility. Their foundation's work in medical research for rare childhood diseases was too important to let pride stand in her way. "Mr. Blake," she said, intercepting him before he reached the bar. "Alexandra Winters. Thank you for coming tonight." His blue eyes assessed her with clinical detachment. "Miss Winters, your invitation was persistent. As is childhood leukemia, Mr. Blake. Some battles require persistence. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face before vanishing. 3 minutes, he said, checking his watch. Make your pitch." Most people would have been intimidated. Alexandra wasn't most people. For precisely 3 minutes, she outlined the foundation's groundbreaking research, the children they'd helped, and the funding gap threatening to end it all. No emotional appeals, just facts and figures, speaking his language. When she finished, he studied her with renewed interest. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect, Mr. Blake?" "Tears and emotional manipulation." "Precisely that. The Winters name still carries social weight, even if your bank accounts don't reflect it anymore." Alexandra stiffened. "Our value isn't measured in dollars. Everything has a price, Miss Winters. The question is whether you understand yours." He sipped his scotch. "Your foundation needs more than a one-time donation. It needs sustainable backing. We're implementing a new fundraising strategy." "Which will fail," he interrupted. "Your board is outdated. Your approach is sentimental. And sentiment doesn't pay research scientists." Alexandra's cheeks flushed. "If you came just to critique our operation, I came because I need something that you can provide." His voice lowered. "And I'm prepared to save your foundation in exchange." "What could I possibly have that you would want?" "Legitimacy." His eyes held hers. "My company is expanding into medical technology. Having a Winters, with your family's spotless reputation and connections to old money philanthropy, as my wife would open doors that remain closed even to me." Alexandra stared, certain she'd misheard. "Your wife. A marriage of convenience. 1 year minimum. possibly extended if mutually beneficial. Your foundation receives full funding plus access to Blake Enterprises' research facilities. You get a seat on my board with actual influence over our medical initiatives. You can't be serious. I'm never anything but Miss Winters. I don't want love or companionship. I want a strategic partnership with clearly defined terms. People don't get married for business advantages anymore. This isn't the 19th century, and yet here we are. You, desperate to save your family legacy, and me, offering a solution that benefits us both. He handed her a business card. My lawyer will contact yours with terms. Take 24 hours. I haven't agreed to anything. No, he said, his expression unreadable. Because beneath your indignation, you're calculating whether your pride is worth the lives your foundation could save with proper funding. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Miss Winters. I value honesty above all else. You've shown that quality tonight. Don't disappoint me by pretending this arrangement would be anything but transactional. As he walked away, Alexandra stood frozen, the business card burning between her fingers. What terrified her most wasn't his outrageous proposal. It was that she was already considering it. Alexandra stared at the contract on her attorney's desk, each clause more restrictive than the last. He's thought of everything, Sarah Jenkins, her family's longtime lawyer, said with reluctant admiration. The terms are actually quite generous financially. Generous, Alexandra echoed. He's buying a wife. He's proposing a business merger, Sarah corrected. With extraordinary benefits for your foundation. The numbers were undeniable. $10 million in immediate funding, access to Blake Enterprises' research facilities and distribution networks, a guaranteed board position with actual voting power, all for 1 year of her life. Your brother called again, Sarah said gently. The foundation can't make payroll next month. Alexandra closed her eyes. The Winters Foundation wasn't just a charity. It was her parents' legacy. After losing them both to a car accident 3 years ago, she and Michael had struggled to keep it afloat. The recession had decimated their endowment, and several major donors had redirected their philanthropy to more fashionable causes. Without this deal, 37 researchers would lose their jobs, and hundreds of children would lose their hope. What about the personal aspects? Alexandra asked, turning to the section titled Marital Obligations. Sarah hesitated. It's unusual. He's not requesting physical intimacy, but requires you to present a convincing appearance of a contented marriage. Separate bedrooms, joint public appearances, no relationships with others during the contract term. He's thought of everything, Alexandra murmured. There's one clause I find particularly telling, Sarah said, pointing to a paragraph near the end. Either party may develop genuine emotional attachment, but such development does not alter the terms or duration of this agreement, unless mutually renegotiated. Alexandra gave a bitter laugh. He's protecting himself from the possibility I might actually fall for him. Or that he might fall for you, Sarah suggested. Impossible. The man's heart is probably kept in a safety deposit box. 3 days later, Alexandra sat across from Damien Blake in his attorney's minimalist office, 60 floors above Manhattan. The skyline stretched before them through floor-to-ceiling windows. A kingdom he commanded with ruthless efficiency. The prenuptial agreement protects both our interests, Blake's lawyer explained. Mr. Blake retains all assets acquired before marriage. The foundation receives the agreed-upon funding, regardless of when or how the marriage ends. Alexandra barely heard him. She was watching Blake, who hadn't spoken since their initial greeting. His expression revealed nothing as he reviewed the documents. Sign here, Ms. Winters, the lawyer directed, breaking her reverie. The fountain pen felt impossibly heavy. Alexandra hesitated, the weight of her decision suddenly overwhelming. Second thoughts, Miss Winters? Blake asked, his voice cool. Alexandra met his gaze. Just wondering what kind of man buys a wife, Mr. Blake. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, but something more complex. The kind who recognizes efficient solutions to mutual problems. Are we proceeding? Alexandra signed her name with a decisive stroke. Blake took the pen from her fingers, their hands brushing briefly. His touch was unexpectedly warm. The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Blake said, standing. My assistant will send a car at 9. Wear something conservative, but not severe. Navy or burgundy would be appropriate. Already dictating my wardrobe, Alexandra asked. Merely suggesting optics that benefit our narrative. We're presenting ourselves as a serious partnership, not a whirlwind romance. What exactly is our story then? How did the infamous Damien Blake fall for a charity worker? We met at your gala, found common ground in medical research interests, began a private courtship away from public scrutiny. After 6 months, decided to formalize our commitment. 6 months. That's rather quick for someone with your reputation for caution, which makes it more believable. The public expects the unexpected from me. He checked his watch. I have another meeting. Do you have questions before tomorrow? 1,000, Alexandra thought, but only one mattered. Why me? There must be dozens of women with better connections, more wealth, more strategic advantage. For the first time, Blake seemed to consider her, not as an asset, but as a person. You didn't cry. You didn't flatter. When I dismissed your foundation's approach, you defended it with facts, not emotion. I respect competence, Miss Winters. Alexandra, she corrected. If we're getting married tomorrow, you should probably use my first name. Alexandra, he repeated, as if testing the sound. Then you should call me Damien. The name felt strange on her tongue. Too intimate for this clinical arrangement. The next morning, their engagement announcement dominated financial news. Alexandra stood beside Damien before a wall of cameras, wearing a navy dress she'd found in the back of her closet. His hand rested lightly on her lower back, perfectly proper, yet oddly possessive. Mr. Blake, is this why you've been acquiring medical technology companies? A reporter called out. My personal and professional interests have aligned fortuitously, Damien replied, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. Alexandra's expertise in medical philanthropy complements Blake Enterprises' expansion goals. Alexandra felt the whispers even before they left the room. Gold digger, trophy wife, corporate climber, none of them knew the truth. That this was the most expensive salvation she could imagine. The coastal villa in Santorini should have been paradise. White walls cascading down the cliffside. Infinity pool merging with the Aegean's impossible blue. Privacy that cost more per night than most people earned in months. It was the most beautiful prison Alexandra had ever seen. 7 days into their honeymoon, she and Damien had established a routine of careful avoidance. He rose before dawn, working remotely until midday. She slept late, then read by the pool until afternoon. They shared a silent dinner prepared by the private chef, exchanged perhaps 20 words, then retreated to their separate suites. Tonight, Alexandra watched him across the terrace dining table, backlit by the setting sun. Even in relaxed linen trousers and an unbuttoned shirt, Damien maintained his distance. His phone buzzed constantly. The world of Blake Enterprises never stopped demanding his attention. Is it always like this? She finally asked, setting down her wine glass. Damien looked up from his phone. Like what? This you, constantly working, even here. The markets don't pause for personal milestones. He returned to his screen. This isn't a milestone. It's a business transaction. Alexandra pushed her chair back. But even business partners communicate. That caught his attention. He set the phone down, studying her with that analytical gaze that made her feel like a puzzle he was solving. What would you like to discuss, Alexandra? Anything. The weather, the food, your childhood pet. Just something human. I didn't have pets. Allergies. He said it matter-of-factly, as if the absence of such a basic childhood experience was irrelevant. Alexandra sighed. This is impossible. What is? Living like this. Being furniture in your life. I agreed to a marriage of convenience, not to disappear. Damien's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened slightly around his glass. The terms were clear. You're not required to entertain me. I'm not trying to entertain you. I'm trying to exist in the same space without feeling like a ghost. She stood, frustration finally boiling over. We're stuck together for a year. We could at least acknowledge each other. What would you suggest? Board games. Heart-to-heart conversations about our feelings. Don't mock me, Alexandra said quietly. You may have bought my presence, but you don't get to diminish me. Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at being challenged. Few people dared confront Damien Blake. You're right, he said after a moment. That was unnecessary. The simple acknowledgement stunned her into silence. Damien stood, walking to the edge of the terrace, against the darkening sky and glittering sea. His silhouette seemed suddenly less imposing. I'm not accustomed to sharing space, he said finally. My life is structured for efficiency, and I'm disrupting that efficiency. You're unexpected. He turned to face her. Most people want something from me. They perform whatever role they think will extract maximum benefit. I already got what I needed in our contract, Alexandra pointed out. The foundation is secure. Then what do you want from these conversations you're proposing? Alexandra approached slowly, stopping a few feet from him. Close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the carefully maintained control. Just to know who I'm living with. Not Damien Blake, CEO, just Damien. He studied her face as if searching for deception. Finding none, he asked, would you like to walk on the beach? The simple suggestion, so normal and yet so unexpected, made her smile. Yes, I would. They descended the private path to the secluded cove below. Alexandra removed her sandals, letting warm sand filter between her toes. To her surprise, Damien did the same, setting aside his expensive loafers with uncharacteristic casualness. They walked in silence at first, but it felt different, less like avoidance, more like peace. I was 12 when I made my first investment, he said suddenly. Paper route money in a tech startup. It tripled in 6 months. Alexandra glanced at him, surprised by the voluntary disclosure. Child prodigy. Child with something to prove. His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. The conversation unfolded slowly, halting at first, then flowing more naturally. Small disclosures, nothing too personal, but real nonetheless. As darkness fell completely, they found themselves sitting on the sand, watching moonlight ripple across the water. When Alexandra shivered in the evening breeze, Damien hesitated, then placed his linen jacket around her shoulders. His fingers brushed her neck, lingering a moment too long. Their eyes met in the darkness. May I continue? He whispered, the question encompassing far more than the simple gesture. Alexandra realized he wasn't just asking for physical permission. He was asking to let down a wall, to try something unplanned, something real. Yes, she answered softly. You may. The New York penthouse felt different upon their return. Not warmer, exactly. The minimalist design still featured more glass and steel than softness, but less like separate territories and more like shared space. Small changes appeared. Coffee waiting for Alexandra in the morning. A book Damien mentioned finding its way to her nightstand. Conversations that extended beyond practicalities into preferences, opinions, even occasional laughter. Their first public appearance after Santorini was at the Blake Enterprises charity gala. Alexandra wore a gown in the exact shade of emerald green that Damien had once mentioned suited her eyes. When she emerged from her room, his momentary stillness told her more than words could. You look, he began, then seemed to recalibrate. That color is excellent for the cameras. Alexandra smiled, recognizing the retreat to safe, practical territory. Thank you. Your tie coordinates perfectly. My assistant's selection, he admitted, then added more quietly, though I would have chosen the same. At the gala, Alexandra noticed the subtle ways Damien had changed. His hand at her back seemed less performative, more protective. When introducing her to board members, he actually listened to her contributions, rather than merely showcasing her presence. Blake looks different, she overheard one executive tell another, almost human. Later that night, as their driver navigated Manhattan traffic, Alexandra felt Damien watching her. You impressed Martin Chen tonight, he said. He rarely compliments anyone's business acumen. The foundation gave me practical experience in biotech investment assessment. It's not just theory for me, Damien nodded. Would you be interested in reviewing some potential acquisitions? Your perspective could be valuable. The request, genuine, professional, respectful, marked a turning point. He was seeing her as a partner, not a purchase. 3 weeks later, Alexandra was working late in the home office. they now sometimes shared when she discovered the file. Buried in acquisition documents for a medical research facility was a small childhood cancer foundation with a familiar name. The Emily Blake Initiative. She was still staring at it when Damien entered. "You should have told me," she said quietly, turning the screen toward him. He froze, his expression shuddering closed. "That's not relevant to the acquisition." "A childhood cancer foundation with your last name. That's very relevant to me." She stood, approaching him carefully. Who was Emily? For a moment, she thought he would walk away. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "My sister," he said finally, his voice controlled. "She was 7 when she died. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia." Alexandra's heart contracted. "I'm so sorry. It was 29 years ago." "That doesn't make it easier." His shoulders tensed. "The foundation was my first major philanthropic effort after Blake Enterprises became profitable. It operates independently." "Why didn't you tell me? Our foundations have aligned missions." "I don't discuss Emily." The finality in his tone was absolute. "The initiative has adequate funding. It doesn't need to be part of our arrangement." Alexandra recognized the walls rebuilding themselves. "Damien," she said gently, "sharing pain isn't weakness." He turned, his expression carefully neutral again. "It's late. We should both get some rest." But at 3 a.m, Alexandra woke to find him standing in her doorway. She sat up, instantly alert. "You asked about Emily," he said, his voice rough. "She loved butterflies, yellow ones. She collected them. Drawings, not specimens. She said it was cruel to pin beautiful things down." Alexandra remained silent, afraid any response might break this fragile moment. "I was 15 when she died," he continued. "My father was already gone. My mother couldn't cope. Started drinking. The house foreclosed 6 months later." "What happened to you?" she asked softly. "Foster care, then scholarships, then work." Each word seemed painfully extracted. "I promised Emily primero de find a cura. I've funded millions in research. But children still die every day." Alexandra slipped from bed, approaching him slowly. "That's why you wanted my foundation. Not just for business connections. Your research team has promising approaches. Different from conventional protocols." He looked away. "I should have been transparent about my interest. Why weren't you?" His laugh held no humor. "Because caring makes you vulnerable. And I learned early that vulnerability gets exploited." Alexandra reached for his hand, half expecting him to pull away. He didn't. "The night my parents died," she said quietly, "I made a similar promise, to continue their work, to make it matter." Their eyes met in the darkness, recognition flowing between them. Of shared purpose, of pain transformed into drive, of defenses built for survival. "We should both get some sleep," she said, echoing his earlier words, but with gentle invitation rather than dismissal. Damien nodded, squeezing her hand briefly before releasing it. At the doorway, he paused. "Alexandra." "Yes, thank you for asking about her." As he disappeared down the hallway, Alexandra realized something had fundamentally shifted. The contract still bound them legally, but something else, something neither had anticipated, was beginning to bind them emotionally, and it terrified them both. The Metropolitan Museum Gala should have been a triumph. 6 months into their marriage, Alexandra and Damien had established themselves as New York's most intriguing power couple. Their joint medical research initiative had just announced a breakthrough treatment protocol. Speculation about their relationship had evolved from cynical to curious to admiring. Alexandra felt Damien's hand at her waist as they posed for photographers. The touch had become familiar, comfortable, dangerous in its growing necessity. "You're stunning tonight," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. The genuine admiration in his voice made her pulse quicken. "Careful, Mr. Blake," she teased. "Someone might think you actually like your wife." His smile, the real one that transformed his face, not the practice version for cameras, appeared briefly. A strategic miscalculation on my part. The flash of warmth in his eyes made Alexandra momentarily forget they were surrounded by hundreds of people. Something had been building between them, especially since the night he'd spoken of Emily. Not just respect or friendship, but a connection neither had anticipated. Then she saw the woman approaching, sleek as a blade in crimson, her calculated smile aimed directly at Damien. "Darling," the woman purred, air kissing Damien's cheek with practiced precision. "How absolutely delicious to see you again." Alexandra felt Damien stiffen beside her, his body suddenly rigid with tension. "Valerie," he acknowledged, his voice returning to the cold tone Alexandra hadn't heard in months. Unexpected. The best surprises always are. Valerie's gaze slid to Alexandra, assessing and dismissing in one glance. "And this must be your current arrangement." "My wife," Damien corrected sharply. "Alexandra, this is Valerie Sinclair, a former acquaintance." "Former wife, darling. No need for euphemisms." Valerie extended manicured fingers. "Enchanted, I'm sure." Alexandra accepted the handshake, feeling ice beneath the woman's polished exterior. "Likewise." "I've been abroad too long," Valerie continued. "Paris, Milan, Tokyo. Imagine my surprise returning to discover Damien Blake had remarried, and so quickly." The emphasis wasn't subtle. Neither was the challenge in her eyes. "If you'll excuse us," Damien said, his tone brooking no argument. "We have other guests to greet." He guided Alexandra away, his hand tense against her back. "You never mentioned being married before," Alexandra said quietly, once they were alone in a quieter gallery. "It was brief. 8 years ago. A mistake rectified through annulment." His jaw tightened. "It's not relevant to our arrangement. Your ex-wife appearing at our first major social event seems relevant. Valerie enjoys creating drama. Nothing more." But it wasn't nothing. 3 days later, Alexandra's assistant delivered the morning tabloids with an apologetic expression. The headline screamed across the front page: "Blake's bigamy scandal. First marriage never legally ended." Beneath it, documents showing the annulment had allegedly never been finalized. Legal experts quoted about potential criminal implications. Valerie, photographed looking tragically betrayed. When Alexandra entered Damien's home office, he was on the phone, his expression thunderous. "Find out who accessed those records," he was saying. "Then have our legal team prepare a statement categorically denying." He looked up, seeing Alexandra with the newspaper. "I'll call back," he said, hanging up. "Is it true?" Alexandra asked, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "Of course not." He stood, agitation visible in every movement. "The annulment was finalized. I saw the documents myself." "Then how did this happen?" "Valerie clearly falsified records. She's always been manipulative." He ran a hand through his hair. "My legal team will resolve this immediately." "And us? What does this mean for us?" Something flickered in his eyes down. "Perhaps. Legally. Our marriage remains valid unless proven otherwise." "I'm not asking about legalities, Damien. I'm asking if you trust me." "What does that have to do with this situation?" "Everything." Alexandra placed the newspaper on his desk. "Valerie is suggesting I knowingly entered a fraudulent marriage, that I'm either a victim or a conspirator. No one who matters will believe that." "Do you believe it?" she pressed. "Do you trust that I had no part in this?" Damien hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible. But Alexandra saw it. "You don't," she whispered, the realization hitting her like physical pain. "Alexandra, that's not. After everything, you still can't trust." She stepped back. "Our contract specified honesty above all else. But you never meant honesty from you, did you? Just transparency from me. You're overreacting. This is Valerie's manipulation, not mine. And yet you immediately suspected I might be part of it." Alexandra moved toward the door. "You still see me as a transaction, a potential liability." "Where are you going?" he demanded as she reached the doorway. "Somewhere I don't have to prove my integrity to someone who promised to respect it." Alexandra closed the door quietly behind her, the controlled gesture masking the shattering she felt inside. Their carefully constructed world had just collapsed, revealing the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere along the way, despite every warning and wall, she'd fallen in love. The man who still couldn't trust her enough to believe in her. The small apartment in Chelsea felt nothing like the penthouse. Alexandra had chosen it precisely for that reason. No sleek surfaces, no panoramic views, just warm brick walls and worn wooden floors. After 3 weeks of separation, she'd established a new routine. Mornings at the Foundation's offices, afternoons consulting with research teams, evenings alone with takeout and grant proposals. No reporters camped outside anymore. The scandal had faded when Blake Enterprises' legal team produced irrefutable evidence that Damien's annulment had indeed been properly filed. Valerie had retreated to Europe, claiming innocence in the misunderstanding. The public had moved on to fresher controversies. Everyone except Alexandra. She was reviewing budget projections when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop across from your office. 20 minutes. Important information regarding DB. Margaret Chen. Alexandra frowned. Margaret Chen was Damien's executive assistant, the formidable woman who had organized his life with military precision for over a decade. They had spoken perhaps 5 times, always with professional courtesy but never warmth. Curiosity won. 20 minutes later, Alexandra slid into a booth across from the impeccably dressed older woman. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said. Her usual crisp tone softened slightly. "I wouldn't have contacted you if it weren't important. Is something wrong with Damien?" Margaret's eyebrow lifted fractionally at the concern in Alexandra's voice. "Physically, no. Otherwise." She slid a folder across the table. "These were found during our internal investigation into the document leak." Alexandra opened it to find emails between Valerie and someone at the county clerk's office, arranging for falsified records, payment confirmations, strategically timed press contacts. "She planned this for months," Margaret explained, waiting for maximum impact. "Why are you showing me this?" Damien's legal team already proved the annulment was valid. "Because there's more." Margaret hesitated. Valerie approached Mr. Blake privately after the scandal broke. She offered to publicly recant in exchange for a significant financial settlement. Alexandra's stomach tightened. Did he pay her? No. He refused any private arrangement, said he wouldn't validate extortion. Relief washed through Alexandra, followed immediately by confusion. "Then why are you here?" This vindicates him. Margaret's expression softened imperceptibly. "I've worked for Mr. Blake for 12 years. I've seen him build an empire through sheer force of will. I've never seen him like this." "Like what?" "Lost." The simple word hung between them. "He functions, he works, he makes decisions, but something essential is missing." Alexandra looked away. "That's not my responsibility." "No," Margaret agreed. "It isn't. But there's something you should know before you decide that permanently." She produced another document, a legal filing dated 2 days after Alexandra had left. "He's transferring ownership of the breakthrough treatment protocol to your foundation. Complete control, no strings attached. The paperwork will arrive officially next week." Alexandra stared at the document. Why would he do that? He said it was always meant to help children, not corporate interests. Margaret gathered her things, preparing to leave. "In 12 years, I've never seen Damien Blake relinquish control of anything valuable without extracting maximum benefit. What are you suggesting?" "Nothing. Merely providing context for your decisions." Margaret stood. "One last thing. The night the scandal broke, after you left, he didn't call his lawyers first. He called me, asking if I thought you had known about Valerie's plan. And what did you tell him?" "That in my professional assessment, you were the only person in his life who had never wanted anything from him except honesty." Margaret's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held unexpected kindness. "He's been punishing himself ever since for doubting that." However briefly, after Margaret left, Alexandra sat motionless, the document spread before her. The careful manipulation Valerie had orchestrated. The principled stand Damien had taken against extortion. The unprecedented gift to her foundation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Blake's people just called. They're doubling our research budget regardless of what happens with you two. What's going on?" Alexandra didn't answer. Instead, she gathered the documents and walked the 20 blocks to their penthouse. His penthouse now. The doorman's surprise was evident, but he let her up without question. The apartment was dark, except for a single lamp in the living room. Damien stood by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, a glass of scotch in his hand. He turned at the sound of the elevator, his expression shifting from surprise to careful neutrality when he saw her. Alexandra. Her name and his voice still affected her even now. Margaret came to see me, she said, stepping into the room. Understanding crossed his face. I didn't ask her to do that. I know, she made that clear. Alexandra placed the folder on the coffee table. She also showed me what you're doing for the foundation. It's not a negotiating tactic, he said quickly. The treatment belongs with people who care about more than profit margins. People like me, yes. The simple affirmation held no calculation, no strategy. Alexandra moved closer, studying the man she'd left 3 weeks ago. He looked thinner, shadows beneath his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. You doubted me, she said quietly. When Valerie made those accusations for a moment, you wondered if I was part of it. Yes. He set down his glass. It was unforgivable. Why did you doubt me, Damien? His gaze met hers directly. Because trusting completely means accepting the possibility of complete betrayal. And I've never been brave enough for that. The raw honesty in his voice reached something deep inside her, the part that recognized his fear, because she shared it. Are you brave enough now? She asked softly. Rain pounded against the penthouse windows, turning the city lights into blurred constellations. Alexandra stood facing Damien, the question hanging between them. Are you brave enough now? I don't know, he admitted, the uncharacteristic uncertainty making him seem suddenly human-sized rather than larger than life. But I want to be. He moved toward her, stopping just outside her personal space, close enough to reach for, but leaving the choice to her. I didn't come here for apologies, Alexandra said. What did you come for? The truth, all of it. No more strategic omissions. Damien nodded, gesturing toward the sofa. They sat, the familiar leather cushions bringing memories of evenings spent reviewing contracts, discussing research, gradually discovering each other's minds. Valerie and I married when I was 30, he began, a calculated decision on both sides. She wanted access to my growing wealth and connections. I wanted a particular image for investors, stability, conventionality. You never loved her. I didn't believe in love then. His eyes met hers. I believed in mutual benefit in clear terms, like our arrangement, Alexandra thought, but didn't say. The marriage collapsed when I discovered she was selling company information to competitors. His jaw tightened. Not just betraying me personally, that I expected eventually, but undermining everything I'd built. That's why trust is so difficult for you. It's why I created a life where trust was unnecessary. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Until you. Me. You challenged every assumption I'd built my existence around, that people only value what benefits them. That emotional attachment is a liability. That control equals safety. His voice roughened. You made me want things I'd convinced myself were irrelevant. What things? Alexandra asked softly. Connection. Honesty. The possibility of being known without being judged. He looked away. When Valerie's accusations emerged, my instinct was to protect those new wants by questioning their source. You doubted me because you were afraid to trust what I made you feel. Yes. The simple admission hung between them. I've spent my life building walls, Alexandra. You walked through them like they were mist. Alexandra reached for his hand, feeling its warmth, its strength, its slight tremor. I didn't come back just because of what Margaret showed me. Why did you come back? Because running from love doesn't make it disappear. It just leaves you alone with it. His fingers tightened around hers. Are you saying? I'm saying our contract had an unexpected clause. She smiled slightly. We developed genuine emotional attachment, and now we need to renegotiate terms. What terms would you propose? His voice was carefully controlled, but hope flickered in his eyes. Honesty without calculation. Trust as a daily choice, not a final destination. The right to be human with each other. Imperfect, sometimes afraid, but always truthful. And the duration? He asked. Indefinite, with regular renewal through actions, not just words. Damien lifted her hand, pressing his lips to her palm in a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. I accept your terms. Alexandra Winters Blake. There's one more condition, she said, moving closer. No more separate bedrooms. His smile, the real one that transformed his entire face, appeared. That's a condition I'm particularly motivated to fulfill. 3 months later, they stood together at the podium of a press conference, announcing the successful first trials of their joint research protocol. Cameras flashed. As Damien spoke about the children, already showing improvement, his usual corporate demeanor, softened by genuine emotion when describing a 7-year-old girl now in remission. This breakthrough belongs to the Winters Foundation, he concluded, and to the memory of Emily Blake, who taught me that beautiful things shouldn't be pinned down, but should be helped to fly. Alexandra squeezed his hand as reporters called out questions. Mr. Blake, how do you respond to rumors that you've become personally involved in patient care? Is it true you've stepped back from daily operations to focus on the foundation? Are you planning to rename Blake Enterprises to include the Winters name? Damien glanced at Alexandra, his expression calm, but eyes dancing with private amusement. My wife has taught me that some questions deserve thoughtful consideration rather than immediate answers. We'll be evaluating all possibilities for our shared future. Later that evening, they walked along the beach near their weekend home. A simple cottage far from Manhattan's constant demands. No designer furniture, no security systems, just weathered wood and windows that opened to the sea. Happy? Damien asked, his arm around her shoulders. Alexandra confirmed, leaning into him. Though I'm still getting used to this new version of Damien Blake, the one who takes weekends off and plays catch with patients. Blame yourself. You created a monster, a CEO with actual human emotions. She laughed. The board must be horrified. Terrified is more accurate. They don't know how to handle me without the predictable ruthlessness. He stopped walking, turning to face her. But I don't care. For the first time since Emily died, I feel aligned. Like the person I am matches the person I want to be. That's not because of me, Alexandra said gently. That's you choosing courage over control. It's both. He brushed windblown hair from her face. You showed me the door, but I had to walk through it. As twilight deepened around them, Damien drew her closer. May I continue? He whispered against her ear. The same words he'd spoken on another beach months ago, when everything had begun to change. Alexandra smiled, recognizing their private ritual. The question that had evolved from a cautious request for permission into a promise of continued commitment, a reminder that every day they chose each other anew. Yes, she answered, as she always did, always yes. Because in the end, their greatest discovery wasn't medical or financial. It was that true power wasn't found in perfect control or complete independence. It was found in the courage to surrender to love, with all its risks, its vulnerabilities, and its remarkable capacity to heal what had once seemed broken beyond repair.